Well, hello again. This is Randall Root, and in this video we're going to take a look at how you can use PowerShell to automate Microsoft SQL Server tasks. Microsoft has long included PowerShell as part of their operating systems. A PowerShell application allows you to connect to the .NET framework, but also to submit commands that are part of the operating system shell. Now, in addition to that, they also allow you to connect to Microsoft SQL and run SQL code. That being the case, like Microsoft's SQL Server's SQL Command Mode and SQL Command.exe application, you can use it to automate SQL tasks. This video is going to go into how that could be done and show you some demonstrations that about how PowerShell works and how you might use it alongside a SQL Server. To start the demonstration, I'm going to open up a command window. And from the command window, I can go ahead and use an operating system command like make directory. Let's see, command test. And I'll put it in C drive. Hit enter. But I could also do the same thing from that SQL command mode. Or application, I should say. I'll need to tell it how to connect to a SQL Server to make this work. Installation of SQL Server 2017 on here, and I'll use that. So I'm in the SQL command mode, and I can use the command mode with a couple of exclamation marks to do basically the same thing. Make a directory, SQL command test. And when I look at my hard drive, I'll see that both those folders were made. One from the command prompt itself, and one from within the SQL command tool. I'll use exit to exit out of SQL command. I can do the same thing with PowerShell. Just have to connect to PowerShell, and once I'm in PowerShell, you can tell by the cursor here, I can use md c:, and I want to tell it ps test. I'll make a new directory. Now I have that. So you can definitely see how I can use PowerShell to run operating system commands. But as I mentioned, we'll also be able to go ahead and run some SQL commands as well. Now you can do it right from a standard command prompt, but you could also open up a PowerShell window. Actually, to tell you the truth, I don't know why I'm looking for it here. The easiest way to do it is to go to the Start menu, start typing in PowerShell, and you'll see an option to open up Windows PowerShell. If you'd like to elevate your permissions, and quite often you may need to, right-click on the icon and say Run as Administrator. You can adjust the font by going up to the little glyph up top, going to Properties, and changing it just like you would a command window. Once the command window is open, I can then go through and type in operating system commands. And it'll make the folder. I can see that folder show up here at the bottom. Let's see, get back there, alongside of my other folders that I've made. So you can definitely see how you could use operating system commands through PowerShell. You can use this environment to do it. You can also use an integrated development environment. If I go to the Start menu again, type in Windows PowerShell, there is a integrated scripting environment, ISE, or sometimes I've heard it pronounced ICE, in which case you get a code window that you can execute PowerShell code out of, like make directory, PowerShell test, 2. And then you can either hit F5 or just click on this button to run the script. If you just want to run some commands in a script file, you can highlight the commands you want to run, hit F8, or just click on this button to run the selection. Either way, though, you'll get your directory, and I'll end up with yet another folder. So you could run PowerShell commands from a variety of different ways. And as you can see, it can work with the operating system code, but we also want to be able to work with SQL code. And so for that, I've made a script file that I want to walk through and show you some of the commands I think you'll find useful. And also I want to show you some ways of interacting with SQL Server. So that's next, and let's open that script. I'll go to the Open option icon and then open up my demonstration file. And make it full screen and start talking about it. I'm also going to change the panel so it shows up on, the results show up on the left-hand side of the screen. And the way it'll work is I will highlight a block of code and run it, and we'll see the results. If I want to clear out the screens, I can either click on this clear console pane icon, or I can use the CLS clear screen command. So there are lots of versions of PowerShell out there. This one's a major build of version 5.1. 1 and 2 are the ones that most articles seem to talk about, but to tell you the truth, they're backwards compatible. So what you learn on the internet about older versions still are applicable mostly in the newer ones. So it's pretty a little confusing at first, but you get over it pretty quickly once you realize that everything just seems to work. This is built on, PowerShell is built on the .NET framework. So it can interact with lots of different classes and modules that have been built into the .NET framework. It was originally made to support administration on lots of different systems as well. So they tried to make it kind of agnostic, and it is an open source movement, a piece of software, so people can adopt it if they want. The standard way the code works is supposed to be kind of agnostic from the operating system itself. So you would write your PowerShell commands like this, where you put in a verb of some type and then some type of object. Like if I want to print data to the screen, the verb is write data to the host. And I can use double quotes, single quotes, no quotes. And if I want to see more about the excuse me, if I want to see more about the function that I'm trying to run, these are called commandlets. I can use get help and then the name of the commandlet, and it will show me syntax hints about how to work with it. A lot of these operating system commands really are just an alias over the top of a PowerShell command. Now there is, for example, clear screen, CLS, is a common operating system command that would clear out results in the results pane here. The clear screen can be ran, and it'll just clear out all that text. But really, it's an alias for clear host, which does the same thing. You can use the get alias command to figure out what the underlying PowerShell code is. So like there's an alias for MD. It's make directory, which is kind of odd because that one's not your standard PowerShell format of a verb and a verb and an object. but this is close to the old operating system stuff. We'd use something like Linux or Unix. Although others, like the deletion command, you can use remove item or delete, because that indeed has an alias, and this is definitely the verb remove and then the object item. So how would I use that? Let's say that I want to go through and clear the screen and look at the directory information of that folder data to process that I made in the first video of this series. This will show me the contents of that folder, but since there is a dir is a alias of get child items, I could also just use that. ls is how we do this in like a Linux environment. You can see that there's an alias for that as well. And it still works here. So the power of aliases is great, because that way people can create a PowerShell environment on different operating systems, and they can have the alias that they're used to for those times where they're just starting to learn. But then at some point you probably want to switch out to pure PowerShell commands. Although I have to say, CLS is a lot easier and more convenient to type than ClearHost. So I'm not sure I'll be switching out completely anytime soon. You can zoom in and out on this editing window. I'm going to go ahead and hold down the control button, roll the mouse wheel, and it zooms in. And I want to zoom in so I can talk a little bit about this next command. This is, I'm going to clear the screen first. This one goes through and checks to see if 4 is equal to 4. Now, you may be used to a equity operator, either a single or double equal sign, but we don't use that here. We actually use EQ for equal or NE for not equal. And there's a dash in front. So I'm going to go through and ask, is it true that 4 is equal to 4? And if it's true, then I want you to go ahead and run the directory listing for that folder. If it's not true, I want you to go ahead and run that. Nothing happens. Or if it's not true, go ahead and run that, but otherwise, or else, run this next statement. Standard if-else statement. And of course, you can use the negation of not equal. It will accomplish what you would expect. If not equal, 4 is not equal to 5, then go ahead and process some data or process a command. You can create folders, as I've shown you, with make directory, but I can use the conditional to kind of conditionally make that. Let's say that I go through and say, if it's true that 4 is not equal to 5, I could go through and make a directory and then list it. I can also delete the directory by using remove item or del for delete. There's a try-catch block. So I can go through and say try one or more statements. Like in this case, I'm going to try dividing by 0. And if something goes wrong, and of course it will, it's going to capture it in the catch block, and I can do something with that. One thing to do is you can use a built-in system variable of $error and capture information. In this case, I'm capturing the zeroth bit of information, 0th row of information. Attempt to divide by 0. Nothing in 3. Ah, interesting. I got it in multiple spots. So this the error object is bringing back a bunch of different items. You could probably put a loop on there and just go through and find out what all those were. But item 0, element 0, would give me the error message. I can use it to a more practical sense to try to remove a database, or excuse me, in this case a folder, and if it fails for some reason, I could go ahead and write out the error message. Cannot find path. Let's see here. In this case, it never actually fired off the message here. It just had a fatal error as if I did this. To force it to actually terminate when the error is found, I need to add this code. I think that's kind of odd. Error actions stop trying to process when you have an error and jump to the catch block. Seems to me like it should do that naturally, but it doesn't. I can write to files. I can go through and let's see here. I'm going to make a PS data file. So it doesn't exist yet, but it will here in a minute. And I'll put some test data in it. You can also, instead of using the add content command, you can pipe data into the text files. This is a piping symbol. So I'm going to go through and get the date. That's data I want to get. And I'm going to send that via the piping symbol here to my text file using set content. Another way to do that is with the out file command. Notice I'm still using the piping operator. That's the pipe operator right there. And if I want to append to it, I just use the dash append, and now I can write to the file like that. Pretty easy to do. So that's some basics about working with the operating system, how to make a folder, make a file, write to the file. So the places you might use that as a SQL developer or database administrator or whatever would be, of course, making folders for backups or making log files of some type. Pretty handy for that. Do keep in mind that you can also, from Management Studio, let's say I go into Management Studio and I pick on a database here. I can start a PowerShell window right from here and interact with it from Visual Studio. Now, if you are in PowerShell and you want to work with SQL Server, you can do that too. So one thing you can do is you can look at the Windows registry and find out on a given machine what installations of SQL Server are on a given machine. Like here, it shows me that I have several installations of SQL Server. I have 3 installations of SQL Server analysis services. I also have 3 installations of the SQL Server database engine, and looks like 2 installations of reporting server. So that's just on this one machine, but that's kind of interesting to see that you can read the registry keys. Once I know what those servers are that I want to connect to, I can also figure out how I'm going to connect. Like I want to connect to my 2016 installation. I would go through and type in MSSQL, dot from my local machine, / MSSQL Server 01. That would allow me to connect to that. Now I can connect to the server and then invoke SQL commands by using the invoke SQL commandlet. You can use get help to find out more information about it. There we go. And as you can see, there's a lot of options here for us to use, but let me just show you some basics. Let's see. So, how do I want to do this? Well, first of all, it's kind of hard to see unless I zoom in a little bit more, but then the problem is that the line gets pretty long. So here's a command that will connect to my server instance of my 2017 SQL 2017 installation. There's a named instance. And here is the query you want to submit, product name and unit price from Northwind products table. Obviously, if I highlight that and run it, it'll connect and show me the product listing. Awesome. Actually, maybe I should put it down here below. Because of it being so long, I can go ahead and use these backticks to continue a line. If this is on a different line, this won't work. You get an error message. To get around that, you put these backticks. Now the backtick is just above the tab and to the left of the 1 on your keyboard. It's where the tilde symbol is. And the other thing you need to know is you have to put a space there. So with the space and then the backtick, you can stack it on one command on multiple lines. So that's connecting to my named instance. And let's see, this one here, I'm going to send it to a text file. Let's see. I'm not sure why I have that twice. Okay. I think it's just a copy and paste error. Because this is the one I really want to do. It's using the out option. You'll notice that it's kind of hard to see, but there's a pipe right here after my SQL command. And then I use the out file option, and it will write that data to a file. Great. And there it is. I can also connect to a server, multiple servers on the same machine. So here's my 2017 installation. Here's my 2014 installation. Here's the iSchool server. Let me put in the name and password. Notice that there's no quotes. And then just run it. And it tells me that's a 2016 installation. So you can see how easy it is to make a connection via PowerShell to SQL and submit queries. You can also submit inserts and updates, deletes, of course, or call stored procedures and perform automation tasks. That makes it very easy. There's actually an upgraded version of the SQL Command Module that has additional features, but this is the one you commonly come across in examples and articles on the internet. One other thing I'd like to show you is how you can use the .NET framework to interact with SQL. Sometimes you want to do something with stored procedures and input and output parameters, and you also want that code to be more usable for other things outside of just Microsoft SQL Server, like connecting to Oracle or DB2 or whatever. Well, in those cases, you can use the .NET framework. Now, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to connect to a SQL Server, but the code would basically be the same thing if I was connecting to Oracle or some other software. The first thing I do is I declare some variables that tells the name of the server, the name of the database, and the code I want to run. Next, I make a brand new object from Microsoft's SQL connection class, or there's an Oracle connection class out there, and an ODBC connection class, so you want to connect to Access or DB2 or MySQL or whatever it is. And then the connection string defining the server name and the database name. I'm using Windows Security, but if you want to, you can put a username and password in here and connect to something else. Now after that, you need a SQL command object, so I make a SQL command object. And once I have a SQL command object, I configure it with the command text and the connection I want to use to issue the command. After that, I need to configure something to capture the results. There's a couple different ways to do it. One is a data reader, another one's a data adapter. Data adapters are perfectly fine. They're a little heavier than a data reader, but they're certainly easy to work with. You just make a brand new data adapter object. You tell it what the code that you're going to use. Now I'm giving it an object. This actually has not only the code that I'm going to use, but also the connection I'm going to connect with. So I make a select command object, and I configure it for the data adapter to use. And then after that, I'll make a data set. The data set is an in-memory structure that will hold all the results. And I just call the fill command to fill up that in-memory structure. That fills up my data set with data. And then once I have that copy of the data in memory, I can close the connection. I don't need to leave it open. But I do want to process it, so for each row in that data set, for table 0, you can have multiple tables. I'll go ahead and pull out column 0 and column 1 from that result set. I can also use this simple method called write.xml, just dump the data from memory into a text file in an XML format. Now, the cool thing about code like this is that it's very close to what the code would look like in Java, VB, JavaScript, just all kinds of other languages. So if I go ahead and open this up, we should see the results. Oops, I want to only run that highlighted portion. You can see it goes through and makes the connection and prints out the data via the loop. In this case, instead of just dumping it out with a header at the top, it's got a comma separated value, whereas the previous data had basically a fixed width and had a header at the top, so it couldn't be like imported easily. I'd have to clean up all that mess. This data, on the other hand, let's see, where am I writing it to? Oh, it's an XML format. It's the dataset data. It's a little easier to import. And of course, I could pipe this data with a comma separate list out into a text file as well. So much more flexible, a lot more writing, a code to write, but much more flexible in how you shape the results and what you can do with those results. So it's a good one to know about. And as I said, if I were to make up code that would connect via Python or Java or JavaScript or other languages, the pattern of how you make a connection, make a command object, and make some kind of way to hold the results and process the results, that pattern stays true throughout many, many, many languages. In fact, I would say pretty much all languages. So once you get the pattern down, by practicing working with something like PowerShell or C# or Python or whatever, you can then apply it to many languages, which is kind of cool. Whereas the invoke command, which is very convenient, hides all that from you, which is, again, convenient, but it doesn't work in other things. So I think there's a reason to learn both. And of course, I can do things like go get the content or read the text file. In this case, you can see that it was indeed saved as an XML format when I used write.xml. And I can go through and do things like this. I'll get the product listing into a variable. I'll read the content into a variable instead of just presenting it. I'll get the content, put it in a variable, and then chop it up by telling it which rows to read. Now, I'm reading not the XML file in this case. I'm actually reading the original one with a header at the top. The product list. So I could read the XML one as well. As you can see, I'm getting row 0, and then row 1, and then row 2, and so on. So if I wanted to, I could use that to process the data into a database or something else. Now, all this is cool. This is all cool, but how would you use it? Well, if you're a database administrator, what you would do is I'd go through and set up some kind of automation. So it might look like this. Test to see if the backup files folder exists. And if it does, just write out folder ready. Okay. Actually, I didn't write that out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the backup folder. And then I'm going to issue backup SQL database command to back up the Northwind database to that folder. So I write this code, I test this code, make sure it works. And see, where are you? Backup folder. Oh, right there at the top. And there's my backup file. Okay, so once I have that, the backup folder's in place, I can just go ahead and open up the command window with this code. Okay, I guess I can take the whole code, but I'll just go ahead and make sure that I can back up to that folder on a regular basis. So that's what I want to do. Right, so I should be able to do it from a PowerShell window. Just like this. And if I come back over, I should see that the date of the timestamp of 1:33 matches the timestamp on my calendar here. So it just happened. I went ahead and ran that. If I wait a little bit and flip it over, I'll see that it's still working. Or actually, to tell you the truth, I'll just go ahead and delete this and run it again. I'll use the up arrow to repeat it. And there we go. So now I know it works, and I just have to go through and schedule for automation. So we can make it a SQL Server agent task like we had previously. This time I'll go ahead and in the steps I'll change it to a PowerShell command. It's okay. It's okay. Delete that and run that. You can see our backup file has shown up again. Awesome. So we can do it that way. We can also go ahead and run it from Task Scheduler. Create task. Now, if I paste it in, it's going to complain. If I say, okay, it says, it appears you got arguments there. Would you like to move those arguments down? Well, yes, I would. So I'll say yes. And when I come back in here, you can see the argument's been moved down here. I think that's pretty cool. The only thing is that I need to submit this to PowerShell. So let's see, I think I'm going about this the wrong way. Here we go. This is what I really want to do. So I guess the answer should have been no. Okay, so let's try that. Opens up PowerShell, does this thing, goes low, and there we go. So the last one I want to show you is in SSIS. So if I make a SSIS package, I can drag an execute process task on to the design surface for the control flow. I can edit it so that it points to PowerShell. And then put in my arguments. Now, if I do that, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, certain things require it, others don't. If I'm trying to connect to SQL and do the backup, I need to change the execution policy so that it's not restricted. A little extra security measure. We didn't have to do that with the Windows scheduler, nor did we have to do it with the SQL Server agent. But here in SSIS, we need to add that on, and then I would add on my code. Now, you could do this in a couple ways. You could actually just take the PowerShell command and put it all in one line like this: execution policy unrestricted, and then the backup command. The other way to do it would be to unrestricted policy and then put your code in a file and then run that file. So if I go ahead, I take out the code that I want and I put it right here in a file. I called it testbackup.ps1 in my data to process folder. I can put one or more PowerShell commands in here and then just go through and execute that file. Either way, I'm going to end up with my backup file. So if I do it with just the command, it runs PowerShell. I end up with a backup file. If I do it with the reading the actual PowerShell file, I can put a lot more code in there, obviously, and it'll run the code, and I'll end up with my backup file. And of course, that's just one example of a task that you could do with SQL Server, but this is just yet another example of how you could use non-SQL code to perform automation tasks with Microsoft SQL Server. Next up in this video series, we're going to take a look at how you could use a programming language like C# to interact with SQL. So I will see you there.